Hello and welcome back to JoeShaferFlyFishing.com. I'm Joe Shafer, and back to my fly series, Shafer's Flies. This next fly up is what I call the Punch It Caddis. This caddis is a very effective pattern. You can fish it on top, greased up, or underneath as a nymph. It works in both applications. Done real well with this pattern over the years. There's a few little tricks in this that I use, a few different materials, and we'll go over those as we go along here. So to start out with, we use a 2487 hook or a Dairiki 270 or a comparable hook. This is a size 16. I'm going to tie this a little bigger for viewing purposes. I'll tie these all the way down to size 22 for tailwaters and all the way up to size 14 for freestones and still water applications. So this can be fished just about in any water you cover where there's caddis. One of the great things about this fly is a couple different materials that we'll look at and mess with here. A couple different tying techniques in this one as well. So when we start off here, we're going to use a Danville 70, a little bit darker tan thread. Okay. On our Shafer Mid, we use a light tan. On this fly, we use a little bit darker tan, as you can see here, to kind of match what's going on with this fly. So when we start out this fly, we're just going to attach the thread here, make a couple wraps, a little jam knot, and we'll start our thread right at that quarter point there. Next up, we're going to tie in a little piece of wire, and I use small brown UTC wire in the color brown. We're going to tie that in first. So we'll take our material here and we'll just make a couple wraps and get that secured in there. Next material we're going to tie in is Wonder Wrap that you see here, or Span Flex. There's many different kinds of these products out there. It's just kind of a rubbery tubing that doesn't have actually a tube through it. It's just kind of flat rubber material. Works real well, and I get that in tan, of course, so this is the color that I use here. So we're gonna tie this in. Make sure when you're working with this Span Flex or this Wonder Wrap, you have a good pair of sharp scissors because it will fray on you. Just a little hint. So we're gonna tie that in, and we're gonna pull back on that Span Flex so it lays a little bit flatter. And we're gonna wrap both of those pieces, the wire and the Wonder Wrap, all the way back just down the bend to where the barb is below. Right about there. We're going to bring that forward with connecting wraps, cover up all those thread wraps and any spots that are missing a little bit that need a little bit of covering up. We're going to return that all the way to the front here. So now we got our two pieces of material. We're going to start off with the Wonder Wrap here. And we're going to palmer this forward. And as you pull forward, you want to pull on that material a little bit. And we want to leave spaces in between those Wonder Wraps. Okay, so we're going to palmer that forward, leaving little gaps in there all the way forward. It's a little bit different technique. Real effective though with this pattern. If it wants to tighten in on you, just go back and leave it open. Open it back up. Pull tight on this stuff, and then we're going to make a few wraps here. Reason we pull tight is if you don't pull tight, those get real loose and your thread can back out or your wraps can unfold. We don't want that to happen. So I make several turns here to tie off that material just to make sure it's good and secure. And then I'm going to come down here, pull on it, and cut it off. And it makes a nice clean head there. Next, I'm going to come back to the wire, and I'm going to lay that wire right in between each one of those wraps. And that way that'll fill in the gap, plus it adds a contrasting color in there. Makes it look real segmented, just like the natural bodies. Bring that to the front. We're going to tie off that wire with a couple wraps. And then I'm going to helicopter that wire off. If you helicopter that wire off, it just breaks real clean and it goes underneath your wraps there. Makes for a real nice area. Smooth area. If you were to cut that off with scissors, you'd have a little tag in there, and you can catch your thread on that and everything else, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. Next up, we're going to tie in a little bit of flash material. You know, the originals, I never included the flash, and it fished just fine. But I noticed when I started fishing this with flash, it started working even more than it did before. So I use a little root beer flash, crystal flash, okay? And I use about 5 strands of this stuff. And all I want to do is tie this in at the top. Just make a few wraps, make sure that doesn't slide out. I like to make sure it's secured. Okay, and I'll just leave that hanging there. Okay. Next up, I actually tie in some foam. Now, this foam acts for 2 different purposes. One is when I'm fishing it as a dry, it gives you a little shoot that you can see. Another is, you know, it could portray a little wing bud coming out or something like that. And just a little white piece of foam that I use. This is open celled foam. Real easy to find. And I cut it way down, as you can see here. I cut it way down, almost in fifths is what I cut it down to. This comes in a little bit heavier strands, so I cut that way down. What I'll do is just tie this in at the top. And all I'm going to do is catch a little, just the littlest piece of that as possible, and then just make sure I cover those wraps. I want to cover that foam completely so it doesn't show through. And as you can see here, it's going to want to stick up to the top. That's exactly the way I want it to stay. Like a little parachute there. I just want it to stay right at the top. Okay, and the last material we're going to use is a little hare's ear dubbing, okay, in tan. All right, and you can see here there's a lot of guard hairs in there and things like that. And I love that stuff. I want that real buggy looking. If you look at Caddis and the naturals, I mean, they're all over the place. They're all messed up. So I like that real buggy look. We're going to come in here and dub. I'm going to take a good portion of that. A lot of this I take right off of the hare's mask. I just cut it off and throw it in a little coffee grinder and blend it myself. It just keeps all those fibers together. As we get that on there, now I'm going to make some wraps behind, starting my thorax. Then I'm going to come all the way through, make a couple wraps, X wraps around that little chute. And then I'm going to bring that thread to the front. You just need a little bit more touch. And you just kind of see if you have any gaps. Just go ahead and dub a little bit of that back in. And there's a little gap right there. So we'll just come back in. And we'll come to just behind the eye. And that's where we're going to tie it off. Now right now that fly doesn't look too good, does it? Looks a little messy. We're going to use our whip finisher. We're going to dub it, tie in a little head here. We'll make a couple wraps just for security of the fly. Right there. And the Punch It Caddis is almost finished. Look at all those good hairs and stuff like that sticking off, real buggy. Okay, all that good stuff. If they're a little too long, I will go back in and trim just a little bit. Just make her sharpen up here a little bit. Sometimes those get a little bit in excess, but that's perfect right there. So this little foam shoot, we're going to come in and I'm going to trim it off just at the base there, so I just have a little tuft. And then with the flash at the back, I don't want it to be any longer than down by the body here. So that's where I kind of judge it. And I typically start it off longer like that. So I'll cut it off there. But I tell you what I do as well with this fly, especially when I'm on the river. If I notice that fish are having a little trouble taking this on the top or as an nymph, what I'll do is cut this flash back and cut it all the way down. And I'll just take little segments off. So I can come in here and take a little segment off that and trim it down a little bit. And a lot of times that starts triggering them to start hitting it. Some days, you know, it works good with this flash. Other days it works good with that flash cut out. Some days you just want to cut that flash all the way off. So it gives you good options with this fly to work around and do a lot of different things with while you're on the river. So it's really a fun little fly to work with and fish and just about any application. So I hope you enjoyed the Punch It Caddis and the Shafer Fly series. Stay tuned for the next fly. Thank you. Take care.